What if the two people who were supposed to love you most, your mother and your brother, stood by and let his new bride publicly humiliate you at their wedding? What if they laughed? I told myself to just get through it. Smile, clap, and survive the evening without making a scene. But then I caught my mother's gaze, bright and brittle, and I knew a storm was brewing just for me. That was the day my world shattered. I'll never forget the shocking turn of events when my innocent 9-year-old son revealed the bride's darkest secret in front of everyone. My name is Amelia Evans. I'm 33 years old, and I never, ever imagined that my own brother David's wedding would become the most mortifying day of my life. We were so close as kids, practically joined at the hip. But everything changed when he met Tiffany. As I stood in that opulent ballroom, watching my family practically deify her, I had no idea that a few cruel words would soon detonate my entire world. And the most painful part was that Tiffany wasn't the only one throwing stones. My own mother was right there beside her, handing her more. My life as a single mom to Mason is something I cherish. It was never the plan, of course, but it has become the most rewarding journey I could have asked for. 7 years ago, I started my own boutique interior design firm, and I found my rhythm, juggling my career with raising my energetic and incredibly observant son. We have a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in a great neighborhood, where Mason grows sunflowers in a small garden patch that now tower over him. Our life isn't perfect, but it's ours. We built it from scratch after my ex-husband left when I was 8 months pregnant, claiming he wasn't ready to be a father. Unbelievable, right? Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Boston, David and I were only 3 years apart. We were inseparable. We'd build these elaborate blanket forts in the living room, and our mom, Alina, would begrudgingly let us keep them up for days. Our dad, Robert, would go crazy at dinner because we had our own secret language. When our parents were too busy, it was David who taught me how to ride a bike, running alongside me, his hand steady on the seat, making sure I didn't fall. When I was 11, I fell out of our treehouse and broke my arm. He practically carried me the half-mile home. He was that kind of brother. But even then, there was a strange dynamic in our family that became more obvious as we got older. David was the golden child, a star athlete, straight-A student, his trophies lining the mantelpiece. I was the creative one, smart but never quite meeting my parents' standards. Alina and Robert were at every single one of David's football games, every debate. But for my art shows, it was usually just David who showed up, always with thoughtful critiques and unwavering support. "Amy, you've got the talent in this family," he'd tell me, using his old nickname for me. "They just haven't caught on yet." After college, David went to law school and became a corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm. I went to art school, worked for a couple of agencies, and then took the leap to start my own business. When my ex-husband vanished, David was my rock. He helped me move into my first apartment as a single mom. He assembled Mason's crib so I could get some sleep. He even did some of the late-night feedings when Mason was a newborn. "That's what siblings are for," he'd say, rocking a crying baby at 3 in the morning. "We're a team." It was always us. Until Tiffany. About 19 months ago, David brought her to Sunday dinner at my parents' house. She was classically beautiful, tall, blonde, with a dazzling smile and impeccable style. She worked in marketing for the massive real estate development firm her family owned. My mother, Alina, was instantly captivated. Tiffany talked about charity galas and vacations in the Maldives, but I noticed something right away. Her demeanor changed when she spoke to me versus my parents. With Alina and Robert, she was animated and engaging, complimenting my mom's decor and asking my dad about his golf handicap. But when I mentioned my design business, she would just nod politely and quickly change the subject back to David's latest courtroom victory. While helping my mom with the dishes, she remarked, "Interior design must be such a fun little hobby. It's great you have something to do while you're looking after Mason." I just bit my tongue. When Mason, who was just a toddler then, spilled some juice, she shot him a look of pure annoyance. "Your son seems a bit spirited," she murmured to me later when we were alone in the kitchen. "Children need firm boundaries, you know." A knot formed in my stomach. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe her privileged background made it hard for her to relate to my life. I even invited her to lunch, just the two of us, hoping to connect. But she always had an excuse: a work event, a salon appointment, a charity committee meeting. Mason, bless his heart, was so excited to have a new aunt. He made her a card in his best second-grade handwriting that said, "Welcome to our family." At the next family dinner, he proudly presented it to her. She took it with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated, and set it aside without even opening it. I saw his little face fall, and my own heart hardened. This woman had no genuine warmth for an innocent child. "I don't think Aunt Tiffany likes my drawings," Mason told me on the drive home. "Well," I said, my voice tight with emotion, "I think your drawings belong in a museum. Some grown-ups just don't appreciate great art." When I tried to voice my concerns to David, he was already under her spell. "Amy, you're not even giving her a chance." "She comes from a different world," he said, a strange coolness in his voice. "She told me she's trying her best." I doubted that very much. After only 6 months, David proposed. It happened at our parents' anniversary dinner. He presented her with a diamond ring that must have cost him a fortune. My mom shrieked with delight. My dad clapped David on the back. I forced a smile so wide I thought my face would crack. The engagement party was at her family's country club. I spent 2 weeks of my grocery money on a new dress to try and fit in with the sea of socialites and lawyers. Mason wore his first little suit, his hair slicked down with water. When people introduced me as David's sister, Tiffany would jump in if they showed any interest in my work. "Oh, Amy does small residential projects," she'd say, her tone making it sound like I decorated dollhouses. "My friend Brittany does the most amazing commercial spaces. You should really talk to her." The wedding planning began immediately, set for just 7 months away. Tiffany hired an expensive wedding planner who ignored my suggestions for more affordable floral arrangements. "We're not really on a budget," Tiffany said flatly. "David and I want the best." I noticed she said David and I, but it was clear she was making all the calls. My brother, once so independent, was now deferring to her on everything. When I asked David about the wedding party, he looked away, uncomfortable. "Amy, Tiffany thinks it would be better if you just focused on helping with Mason during the day. She's having her sorority sisters as bridesmaids, and it would be uneven." In our family, siblings were always in the wedding party. I just nodded, as if it wasn't a slap in the face, and cried in my bathroom later with the water running so Mason wouldn't hear. I was losing my brother, piece by piece. The bridal shower was another exercise in humiliation. It was at an exclusive women's club. My mom sat at the head table. I was seated with distant cousins. I'd spent weeks creating a beautiful, hand-bound photo album for them. When Tiffany opened it, she said, "Oh, how crafty," and quickly set it aside for the next gift, an expensive crystal vase. Later, she accidentally bumped into me, spilling red wine all over my cream-colored dress. "Oh no, what a shame," she said, dabbing at it uselessly. "That will never come out. You should probably go home and change." Her eyes, however, were anything but apologetic. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, David became more distant. Our weekly coffee dates were canceled. He stopped coming over to play with Mason, who kept asking when Uncle David was coming. My parents, swept up in the excitement, noticed nothing. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mason drew a picture of our new blended family, David in his lawyer suit, Tiffany in a princess dress, me, and himself, all holding hands. "This is so we remember we're all a family now," he said seriously. We framed it in a simple wooden frame I painted gold. At the rehearsal dinner, when he gave it to her, Tiffany said, "How sweet!" And then I saw her, when she thought no one was looking, toss it into a decorative trash can by the restaurant's exit. My heart shattered. I retrieved it without her seeing, not knowing if I should tell Mason or just let him believe it was hanging in their new home. I almost didn't go to the wedding, but I loved my brother, and I knew my absence would create a rift that might never heal. I decided I would go, hold my head high, and support him, even if he couldn't see how his fiancée was methodically cutting him off from everyone who truly loved him. "We'll just go for the ceremony and a little bit of the reception," I told Mason as I tucked him in. "The important thing is that Uncle David sees we're there for him." "Okay," Mason mumbled sleepily. "Maybe Tiffany will like my other picture. I made a special one for her wedding day." I stroked his hair, amazed at his resilient heart. "You have the biggest heart I know, buddy," I whispered, praying she wouldn't crush it again. The wedding day dawned bright and sunny, a cruel joke given the turmoil inside me. Mason was ecstatic, mostly about getting to ride in a limousine, a splurge I'd made to avoid the parking nightmare downtown. "Do you think Aunt Tiffany will let me be a flower boy?" he asked as I fixed his little tie. "They already have flower kids, sweetie," I said gently. "But you get to be my handsome date, which is the most important job." I wore a simple but elegant forest green dress I'd found on sale. I wasn't there to compete with the bridal party. The ceremony was at St. Catherine's Cathedral, a magnificent stone building. Tiffany's father's donation had secured them a spot on a 2-year waiting list. We arrived an hour early, as requested for family. When we entered, an usher told us the groom's side was on the right. But as we walked in, I saw nearly all the front pews were already marked, reserved, for Tiffany's family. A young woman with a clipboard intercepted us. "You must be Amelia." She scanned her list. "You and your son are in row 12. Row 12, I was the groom's sister. Her apologetic look told me it wasn't her decision. "The front rows are for parents, grandparents, and other close family," she stammered. The sting of it was sharp. I led Mason to our seats, so far back we could barely see the altar. Soon after, Tiffany's extended family, great-aunts and second cousins, began filling the rows in front of us. My parents arrived and were escorted to the front row. My mother, in her expensive new outfit, didn't even look for me. They were playing their role as parents of the groom, and it was as if I didn't exist. The ceremony itself was beautiful. David looked happier than I'd seen him in months. A mix of emotions washed over me. happiness for him, sadness for the distance between us, and a deep-seated worry about the woman he was marrying. When Tiffany walked down the aisle, my brother's face was pure adoration. Even I had to admit she looked stunning. Mason held my hand, whispering questions. When they were pronounced husband and wife, he squeezed my hand. "Now she's really our family, right, Mom?" he whispered. "Yes, sweetie," I whispered back, a foolish hope flickering that maybe now things would change. That hope died in the receiving line. David gave me a quick, distracted hug before Tiffany's mother pulled him away for a photo. Tiffany offered me a cold cheek-to-air kiss. "Congratulations," I said, trying to be sincere. "It was a beautiful ceremony." "Thanks for coming," she replied, her eyes already looking past me to the next guest. Mason tried to give her his new drawing. "I made this for you," he said. "Put it with the gifts, sweetie," she said without a glance. "We have to do pictures." I led a dejected Mason away, his folder still in hand. The reception was at the Belmont, the fanciest hotel in the city. The ballroom was a winter wonderland with crystal decorations and ice sculptures, despite it being June. Mason was bored instantly. There were no other children. I found him a seat by a window where he could watch the boats on the river. During the cocktail hour, I endured pitying looks from Tiffany's friends. I overheard snippets. With the little boy, all by herself. And heard she lives in that up-and-coming area near the old factories. My cheeks burned with shame. I escaped to the restroom, only to overhear Tiffany in a stall talking to her maid of honor. "David's family is just so provincial. I mean, her dress is straight off the rack, and her son is so undisciplined." Back in the ballroom, my own mother cornered me. "Amelia, I do wish you'd put more effort into your appearance. Tiffany's friends are so elegant." "This is the best I have, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Well," she sighed, "just try harder with Tiffany, please." For David's sake. I felt like screaming that I had tried, that I had been rejected at every turn. But I just nodded. We found our table at the very back of the room, seated with David's junior colleagues and some distant relatives. We could barely see the head table where my brother, Tiffany, and both sets of parents sat beneath a canopy of flowers. Mason sat beside me, his eyes wide, taking in the spectacle. He kept looking at the head table, at the family we weren't a part of. I squeezed his hand, a silent promise that we were a team, no matter what. But my perceptive little boy was noticing more than I realized. The toasts began. Tiffany's father went on about how lucky David was to be marrying into their family and announced he'd already secured David a job at his firm. "No more of that public defender nonsense," he boomed. I saw David flinch. The best man gave a nice speech. Then David spoke, thanking everyone. He thanked our parents, but he never mentioned me, never acknowledged the bond we once had. As dessert was served, I was planning our escape. Mason was getting restless. Then Tiffany, flushed with champagne, grabbed the microphone for an impromptu speech. She thanked her parents, David's parents, her bridesmaids. Then her tone sharpened, and her eyes found me in the back of the room. "And I have to say, it's been so interesting getting to know David's family," she said, a smirk playing on her lips. "You see the stark contrast between David, this brilliant, successful man, and his sister, the poor single mother who couldn't even keep a man." A shocked silence fell over the room. Then, to my utter horror, my own mother laughed, a high, social laugh. "Oh, Tiffany, you're terrible," she trilled. "But you're not wrong. Amelia has always been our challenging one. She's like the damaged goods you find in the bargain bin." The room filled with awkward, tittering laughter. "I just think children deserve a proper family," Tiffany continued, her voice dripping with fake concern. Not to be raised by someone with such poor judgment. I was frozen, the humiliation washing over me like acid. My hands were shaking. I couldn't look at Mason. I saw David whisper something to her, but she just waved him off. The DJ, sensing a catastrophe, tried to intervene. Okay, let's get the happy couple on the dance floor for their first dance. As the music started, I felt a small tug on my arm. It was Mason. His face was a mixture of confusion and fierce loyalty. "Mom, can I go to the bathroom?" he asked softly. "Of course, sweetie, it's just past the dessert table." He nodded and slipped away. As David and Tiffany swayed on the dance floor, I watched through blurry eyes. My brother, who had sat silently during my character assassination, now looked blissfully happy. Just as I was deciding whether to follow Mason or just walk out, the music stopped abruptly. I looked up. Mason had somehow gotten onto the DJ's stage and was holding the second microphone. The DJ hadn't noticed him until it was too late. My son's clear voice echoed through the massive ballroom. "Excuse me, everybody." Everyone turned to stare. David and Tiffany stopped dancing, bewildered. "I know a secret about the bride," Mason said, his voice steady. The room went dead silent. I started to move toward him to stop him, but his calm resolve held me back. "I saw her," he continued. 4 weeks ago at the Green Hills Mall. My mom was next door buying a picture frame and I was at the toy store. I saw Aunt Tiffany by the big fountain, and she wasn't with Uncle David." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Tiffany's face went sheet white. David stood frozen beside her. "She was with another man," Mason said, his voice clear as a bell. "He had a beard and a blue jacket with patches on the elbows. She was kissing him, a really long kiss, and he gave her a key and said, 'Can't wait for our weekend,' and she said it would be their special getaway." I instantly recognized the description. It was Chad, her ex-boyfriend from college. She'd once shown me a picture, claiming they were just good friends. Mason finished, his innocent eyes scanning the crowd. "My mom says interrupting is rude, but the bride interrupted my mom, so I thought it was okay now." For a moment, there was pure, shocked silence. Then chaos. "That's a lie," Tiffany shrieked. "He's making it up. The little brat is disturbed." David turned to her, his face a hard mask. "You were at the mall 4 weeks ago with Chad. Get that child off the stage." Tiffany's father roared, rising from his seat. My mother, who had been laughing at my expense moments earlier, now looked horrified. I rushed to the stage, not to silence Mason, but to protect him. I scooped him into my arms. "Did I do something wrong, Mom?" he whispered. "No, baby," I whispered back, holding him tight. "You told the truth. Daniel, you can't believe this nonsense," Tiffany pleaded. But a cold, calculating look had replaced the shock on my brother's face, the same look he got when cross-examining a hostile witness. "You told me you were at a spa retreat with your mother that weekend," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We were." Tiffany's mother chimed in, nodding vigorously. David pulled out his phone. "That's funny, because I called that spa last week to book us a couple's massage as a surprise, and they told me they were closed for renovations the entire month." The color drained from both women's faces. "Why is she so mad at me?" Mason asked, genuinely confused. "I just saw her with her friend." "Because, sweetie," I explained gently, "he wasn't just a friend, and she's supposed to be marrying Uncle David, not kissing other men." Mason's brow furrowed. "So she was being sneaky, like Jack in my class who takes extra cookies and then lies about it." "Exactly like that," I said, "but much, much worse." Just then Mike, David's best man, stood up. "Dan," he said, his voice tight, Man, I'm sorry, but I saw her about a month ago, leaving the Park View apartments with a guy who fits that description. The Park View, David repeated, his voice hollow. Isn't that where Chad lives? Tiffany's eyes shot daggers at Mike. She turned back to David, her denials becoming more frantic. It was just a goodbye, David. He needed closure. Closure, David shot back. With a key to his apartment, I watched my brother's face, the man I grew up with, as he processed the betrayal. I could see the exact moment the spell was broken. Your purse, he said suddenly. Give me your purse. After a tense standoff, she handed over her small satin clutch. He emptied it on a table. Lipstick, a wallet, and a single key on a plain ring. He held it up. This isn't a key to our condo or your parents' house. It's a spare for my office, she stammered. Your office has key cards, David replied flatly. No physical keys. The silence was deafening. Can we go home now, Mom? Mason whispered. I don't like this party anymore. I nodded and started gathering our things. As we headed for the door, David's voice cut through the room. Amy, wait. He walked over to us, leaving Tiffany standing amidst the wreckage of their wedding. He knelt down to Mason. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You were very brave to tell the truth. Mason nodded seriously. Mom says lying just makes things worse, even when the truth is hard. David looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw my brother again, the real him. She's right, he said. Amy, I am so sorry for everything, for letting this happen, for not seeing what was right in front of me. Tiffany's father stormed over. Are you really going to let a child's fantasy destroy a $100,000 wedding? David faced him. Sir, with all due respect, what I'm destroying is a lifetime of lies. What I'm saving is what's left of my integrity and my family. He turned back to me. Take Mason home. I'll call you tomorrow, I promise. In the quiet of the limousine on the way home, Mason fell asleep on my shoulder. Back in our little apartment, our sanctuary, I tucked him into bed. He stirred for a moment and mumbled, Is Uncle David okay now? I kissed his forehead. I think he will be. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, there was a knock on my door. It was David, still in his tuxedo, looking utterly exhausted. Can I come in? He asked. He collapsed on my couch. It's over, he said. She finally admitted everything. She was seeing him the whole time. I was just the respectable choice, the one her parents approved of. She was going to marry me and keep him on the side. We sat in silence for a long time. The chaos at the reception had continued, with more friends admitting they had seen Tiffany with Chad. Her parents had threatened lawsuits. My mother had actually blamed me and Mason for ruining David's perfect day. I told her, David said, his jaw tight, that what she let happen to you tonight was unforgivable. I told her I was ashamed of her. Tears welled in my eyes. It was the defense I had been waiting months to hear. You didn't have to do that, I whispered. Yes, he said, looking at me directly, his eyes full of regret. I did. I let her poison me against you. I let myself get blinded by the money and the status. I almost lost the most important person in my life. I almost lost my team. He took a deep breath. It's going to be a long road, Amy, annulment, lawyers, but I'm free. And it's because of you and Mason. You reminded me who I am. I reached out and took his hand, the way we used to as kids. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I had my brother back.